"Get out of the car now." "I haven't done anything wrong," I said. "Get out." "Sir, I am 76 years old. You will not speak to me this way. Do I look like I care? Out." Now, that was Deputy Marcus Whitfield. A Saturday morning, quiet and gold with early sunlight, on a tree-lined street in Bellhaven, Georgia. They threw her down face first. Her cheekbones struck the curb. Her veteran's cap rolled into the gutter and stopped against a storm drain. 3 neighbors watched from behind their curtains. Nobody moved. But what happened next on that street, nobody was ready for. Hold on, though. We need to rewind, because this morning didn't begin with sirens and handcuffs. It began with hymns on the radio and a trunk full of canned soup. 5:40 in the morning, Bellhaven, Georgia. The sky hadn't fully lightened yet. Odessa Marchetti, everyone on the block called her Miss Odessa, was already awake, sitting on the edge of her bed, just breathing. That had been her ritual for over 30 years, an old habit from her army days. You don't rush the morning. You meet it standing. She rose. Her left hip clicked the way it had ever since the surgery 3 years back. She didn't complain. She never did. Her house was modest, white clapboard, a wraparound porch with 2 rocking chairs, one hers, one that had belonged to her husband, Command Sergeant Major Elias Marchetti, gone 6 years now. A stroke, quick and quiet, the way he'd have wanted it if he'd been asked. The hallway told her whole life if you knew how to read it. Photographs lined both walls. Odessa in dress uniform, young and unshaken. Elias beside her, grinning like the camera owed him money. Their son Theodore at his first promotion ceremony. Then his second. Then the day they pinned his second star to his shoulder. Nobody who visited that house ever saw those photographs, because nobody ever got past the front room. Odessa kept her history in that hallway on purpose. It was hers, private. She ironed a pale yellow blouse, pulled on clean slacks, slid her feet into flats, the only shoes her hip tolerated anymore. She clipped on the thin gold cross that had belonged to her mother and lifted her faded Army veteran's cap off the hook by the door. Then she loaded the car. 16 cans of soup, 10 cans of green beans, a box of donated children's books from the church nursery, 4 wool blankets, all bound for the Veterans Outreach Pantry on Larkspur Street, where she'd volunteered every single Saturday for the past 12 years. The old Buick started on the second try. It always took 2. Gospel music hummed low from the radio. The morning smelled like wet grass and somebody's honeysuckle. She backed out of the driveway and waved to her neighbor, Louise Abernathy, who was already out on her porch with her coffee. "Gorgeous morning, Odessa. The Lord's doing his best work today, Louise." That was Odessa Marchetti's Saturday, same as it had been for over a decade. Nothing unusual, nothing remotely suspicious. A 76-year-old grandmother driving canned food to hungry veterans. Now, here's what you need to understand about Bellhaven. It's the kind of town that's changing fast. New coffee shops sliding into old hardware store buildings, property values climbing every quarter. But underneath the fresh paint, the old boundaries were still very much there. The east side, mostly white, mostly new money. The west side, where Odessa had lived for 24 years, mostly black, mostly working families who'd been there 3 generations. The Bellhaven County Sheriff's Office had 52 deputies. 46 were white. The department had been quietly flagged twice by a state oversight review for wildly disproportionate traffic stops. Both times, the internal review concluded there was no pattern. Both times, the raw numbers said otherwise. Black residents made up 14% of Bellhaven's population. They accounted for 66% of all traffic stops and 81% of all vehicle searches. Everyone on the west side knew it. Nobody wearing a badge would admit it. And every single Saturday morning, parked at the corner of Larkspur and Pine, right along the invisible seam between the 2 halves of town, sat the same patrol cruiser, Deputy Marcus Whitfield behind the wheel. Deputy Casey Boone in the passenger seat, watching. Now, 210 miles north, at Fort Ridgeline, Virginia, 4:30 that same morning, a federal logistics convoy was already rolling out of the gate. 16 vehicles, armored transports, supply trucks, 2 command vehicles, a routine resupply run to a regional depot. Boring paperwork on wheels. Except for one detail. Major General Theodore Marchetti, 2 stars, Deputy Commanding General overseeing the operation, was riding in the lead command vehicle. A bridge weight restriction had forced a last-minute reroute straight through Bellhaven, Georgia. Theodore was supervising the detour personally because the previous reroute had cost his people a 14-hour delay, and he wasn't about to let that happen twice. At 6:50 that morning, he texted his mother, "Morning, Mom. Convoys routing through Bellhaven today. Might swing for dinner tonight if the schedule holds." She texted back a small red heart. Then, "Drive safe, baby. Love you." He smiled, tucked the phone away, and turned back to his briefing packet. Neither of them had any idea that in less than 3 hours, that convoy would be parked on Odessa Marchetti's street, and the whole country would know her name by nightfall. Odessa turned left onto Larkspur. Slow, signal already on, doing 22 in a 25 zone. She always drove under the limit. Elias used to tease her about it. "Des, the turtles are passing us on the left." She didn't make it 2 blocks. Blue and red lights flared in her rearview mirror. No siren. Just the lights, spinning, silent, deliberate. Odessa pulled over immediately, shifted into park, and turned the gospel station down. She placed both hands on the wheel, 10 and 2. That wasn't nerves. That was training. 28 years in the Army teaches you. Keep your hands visible. Always. The cruiser sat behind her for a long minute. Just sitting. Lights still spinning. That was a tactic. Whitfield liked to let people stew, let their nerves build, let them start fidgeting, because fidgeting gave him something to write down later. Odessa didn't fidget. She waited. Whitfield stepped out first, adjusted his belt, took his time. Boone came out the passenger side and hung back near the rear bumper. Standard positioning, one at the window, one watching from behind. Whitfield walked up to the driver's window. He didn't crouch to eye level the way training required. He stood tall and looked down, forcing her to crane her neck up just to see his face. No good morning, no introduction, no explanation for the stop. License and registration. Odessa kept her hands where he could see them. "Good morning, Deputy. May I ask why I've been stopped?" "License and registration." Did I stutter? "My purse is on the passenger seat." "I'm going to reach for it slowly." "Hands on the wheel," he snapped, his hand drifting to his hip. She froze mid-reach. 3 seconds. 5. 10. Then, slowly, she leaned across, opened her purse, and handed him her license through the window. The registration was in the glove box. She told him so before opening it, and passed that through, too. Whitfield studied the license, glanced at her, studied it again, like something didn't add up. Like the 76-year-old woman in front of him didn't match the paper in his hand. "Sit tight." He walked back to his cruiser. Odessa sat, hands on the wheel, gospel music low, morning sun climbing over the oaks, the smell of cut grass drifting through the open window. 5 minutes. 7. 10. Inside the cruiser, Whitfield ran her plate, came back clean. Ran her license. Spotless. Not so much as a parking ticket in 24 years at the same address. Valid registration. Valid insurance. Everything was, in every sense of the word, perfect. He came back anyway. "Ma'am, your right taillight's out." It wasn't. Both taillights worked fine. Louise Abernathy would later confirm it from her porch footage, timestamp and all. "I had them both checked last month," Odessa said. "They're working. You arguing with me?" "No, sir. I'm stating a fact." Whitfield leaned into the window frame, close enough she could smell his coffee. "Here's a fact for you. Your license isn't clearing right in our system. Some kind of flag." There was no flag. There was no system issue. He invented it on the spot. That isn't possible. My record is clean. Ma'am, I need you to step out of the vehicle. For a taillight? For your safety and mine. Step out. Odessa looked at him. She had served under commanders through the First Gulf War. She had walked through checkpoints in the Balkans that would break grown men in half. She knew exactly what this was. She also knew, with the bone-deep certainty of someone who has lived it, what tends to happen to black citizens who refuse. I'll step out, she said, but I'd like your badge number first. You don't need my badge number. I'm entitled to ask for. What you're entitled to is following instructions. Step out, or I'll remove you myself. Your choice. She unbuckled slowly. Her hip was stiff from sitting. She swung her legs out, planted her feet on the asphalt, and pushed herself up, holding the door frame for balance. It took a few seconds longer than it used to. Move to the back of the vehicle, Whitfield said, already impatient. I'm moving. My hip. I don't need your medical history. Move. She limped toward the trunk. Boone was already there, arms folded, watching her approach with flat, unreadable eyes. Hands on the trunk. She placed her palms on the sun-warmed metal. The cans inside shifted and rolled. Spread your feet. 76 years old, standing on a public street. Hands on the trunk of her own car. Told to spread her feet like a suspect in a robbery. At 9:18 on a Saturday morning, 2 blocks from her own front door. Whitfield keyed his radio. Voice calm, almost bored. Dispatch, possible registration issue at Larkspur and Pine. Drivers being non-compliant. Requesting backup. Non-compliant. She had done everything asked of her. Every single thing. Handed over documents, stepped out, walked to the trunk, placed her hands down. And he called her non-compliant. The radio crackled back in acknowledgement. Boone shifted his weight, glanced across the street seat. Louise Abernathy was standing on her porch now, coffee mug in one hand, phone raised in the other, recording. Neighbors got her phone out, Boone murmured. Whitfield didn't turn around. Let her record. She'll see us doing our jobs. Odessa stared at her own warped reflection in the trunk's paint. I've lived on this street for 24 years, she said quietly. I know every family on this block. You know I haven't done anything. Whitfield stepped in close behind her, close enough that she felt his breath on the back of her neck. Ma'am, the only thing I know is you're going to stand right there and keep quiet until I say otherwise. She closed her eyes, her cross pressed cool against her collarbone. Somewhere, 3 blocks east, a low mechanical rumble was building, still faint, still far off. Nobody on that street had noticed it yet. Whitfield popped the trunk without asking, without a word about consent or probable cause. It swung open on 16 cans of soup, 10 cans of beans, a box of children's books, 4 folded blankets. He stared at it like it was evidence. What's all this? Donations, Odessa said. For the veterans' pantry on Larkspur. I volunteer there every Saturday. He picked up a can, turned it over, set it down, picked up another, like he was cataloging a crime scene. That's a lot of supplies for one person. It's not for one person, it's for the pantry. Who told you to bring all this? Nobody told me anything. I've been doing this for 12 years. He exchanged a look with Boone, the kind of look that means nothing to a camera and everything to the person standing 3 feet away. You running some kind of operation, ma'am? Excuse me? I asked you a question. All this stuff. Who's it really for? I already told you. It's for veterans, yeah. You said that. He shut the trunk slowly, let it hang a beat before it clicked. We'll see. Then he turned to her purse, still sitting on the passenger seat. He walked around, yanked the door open, grabbed it, and dumped the entire contents onto the hood. Everything scattered. Reading glasses, her wallet, a tube of hand cream, her VA medical card, a small leather-bound Bible with a cracked spine, and a photograph. Elias in dress uniform, grinning at the sky. It slid to the edge of the hood and nearly fell. Odessa reached for it instinctively. Don't touch that. He pointed a single finger at her, like scolding a child. She pulled her hand back and watched the photograph of her dead husband lying face up on the hot metal hood of her own car, while two armed men picked through the pieces of her life like they were sorting contraband. He picked up the VA card, read it aloud flatly, tossed it onto the Bible, counted the $41 in her wallet, set it down without comment, picked up the Bible, flipped through the pages, shook it as though something illegal might fall out. Nothing did. He dropped it back onto the hood. The spine cracked a little further. "This is humiliating," Odessa said. "What was that?" "I said this is humiliating. You've searched my car, gone through my purse, and found nothing, because there was nothing to find. You don't get to tell me when I'm done. I want both your badge numbers. Already told you no. I'm asking again." Whitfield smiled, not a warm smile, the kind that dares you to keep pushing. "File a complaint." "I will. And I want to call my son." "No calls. I have a right to. You have a right to stand there and be quiet. That's the extent of your rights right now." Her jaw tightened. She turned to Boone, who had said nothing this entire time, arms crossed, watching. "Young man," she said, "do you see what's happening here? Is this what they teach at the academy?" Boone blinked. His mouth opened slightly. Something crossed his face, maybe discomfort, maybe the ghost of a conscience, and then it was gone. "Ma'am, just cooperate, and this'll be over soon." "I have cooperated, from the first second." Boone looked away. Across the street, another neighbor had pulled his car over and was filming from inside it. Louise Abernathy, was still recording, tears now visible on her face, even from a distance. Whitfield came back around the car, done pretending to search, now simply standing in Odessa's space. Too close. She could smell his sweat mixing with the rising heat. "You know what your problem is?" he said. "You think because you're old, you get to run your mouth. You think you get special treatment. I think I get treated like a citizen. You get treated like whatever I decide." He poked her shoulder with 2 fingers, not hard, just enough to make her rock back a step. She didn't take the step. She stood exactly where she was. 76 years old, bad hip, pale yellow blouse, gold cross, and did not move. Something shifted behind Whitfield's eyes. He wasn't irritated anymore. He was furious, because she wasn't breaking. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was standing on her own street, looking him dead in the face, and she was not afraid. That made her dangerous, in his eyes. "I'm going to ask you one more time," he said. "Turn around, hands behind your back. Why am I being arrested?" "You're being detained." "For what?" "Failure to comply. I've complied with everything you've asked. You're complying when I say you're complying." He seized her left wrist and twisted it behind her back. She gasped. Her shoulder hadn't been built for that motion in years. Boone moved in and took the other wrist. Together they bent her forward over the hood, her face inches from the photograph of Elias. She looked at it, her husband, smiling. Then Whitfield shoved her off the hood and down. Both officers drove her to the pavement. Her cheekbones struck the curb. Her glasses skittered across the asphalt and cracked under Boone's boot. The Bible slid off the hood and landed open in the road, pages fanning in the warm breeze. They rolled her onto her stomach and cuffed her wrists behind her back. The metal bit into her skin. She lay face down, cheek against the hot pavement, and could just see her veteran's cap lying in the gutter, a tire track pressed clean across the faded patch. Whitfield stood, keyed his radio, voice as calm as if he were ordering coffee. "Dispatch, suspects in custody. Combative female, resisted arrest. Combative, a 76-year-old woman with a bad hip and a Bible. Combative." Louise was sobbing on her porch, still filming. The second driver had climbed out of his car entirely now, phone shaking in his hand. Odessa lay still. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She breathed, slow, controlled, the way the army had taught her decades ago. But her lips were moving. If you'd been close enough, you'd have heard her praying. 3 blocks east, the engines were louder now. The ground had begun to hum, faint but steady, the kind of vibration you feel in your chest before your ears catch up to it. Whitfield didn't notice. He was too busy filling out his report. The first thing he noticed was the shadow, sliding across the pavement like a slow eclipse. He looked up. An armored transport had turned onto Larkspur Street. Federal olive drab, dust on the hood, a flag mounted on the antenna. Then another behind it. And another. 16 vehicles total, rolling bumper to bumper down a residential street at a crawl, engines shaking the windows of every house on the block. Louise felt her porch rattle under her own feet. The lead vehicle stopped, not for traffic, but because Staff Sergeant Renata Cole, riding in the passenger seat, former military police herself, had seen exactly what was unfolding on that sidewalk. An elderly black woman, face down, handcuffed, 2 officers standing over her like she was nothing. Cole raised a closed fist, the convoy signal for a full stop. Every vehicle behind her braked in sequence, one after another, until the entire street was choked with olive green steel, engines idling low and heavy like a held breath. Whitfield stared, radio still in hand, mouth slightly open. Boone took one step back from Odessa, then another, as though the ground beneath him had physically shifted. Doors opened. Soldiers stepped out. Not fast, not aggressive, just disciplined, controlled. 5, 10, 15. 36 of them eventually, standing in full uniform along both sides of Larkspur Street. Silent, watching. Nobody said a word. Nobody needed to. Whitfield's voice cracked when he finally found it. This is a civilian law enforcement matter. You people have no jurisdiction here. Nobody answered him. The soldiers simply stood, eyes forward, arms at their sides. 36 statues in combat boots. Then, the rear command vehicle's door swung open. Major General Theodore Marchetti stepped down. 2 stars on his chest, 6'3", shoulders that filled the doorway of the vehicle behind him. His boots hit the pavement and the sound seemed to echo off the houses. He didn't rush. He walked, steady, measured, every step deliberate, every second accounted for. The soldiers straightened without being told, because that is simply what happens when a 2-star general is walking toward a scene. Theodore's eyes swept the street, the cruiser, the flashing lights, the canned goods scattered on the ground, the Bible lying open on the asphalt, the veteran's cap in the gutter with a tire mark pressed across the patch. Then he saw his mother, face down, handcuffed, cheek against the pavement, blouse torn at the shoulder, her gold cross dangling loose against the asphalt. He stopped walking. Just for a second. His jaw locked, his fists clenched at his sides. Something enormous and barely contained moved behind his eyes. Then he kept walking. He stopped 6 feet from Whitfield and looked down at him. Whitfield stood 5'9". Theodore stood 6'3". The gap felt like a canyon. "Deputy," Theodore said, voice low, calm, quiet enough that you had to lean in to hear it. And that quiet was what made it terrifying. "What is your name?" It wasn't a question, it was a command. "Whitfield, Marcus Whitfield, Deputy Whitfield." The woman on the ground. "Do you know who she is?" Whitfield swallowed. She was non-compliant during a routine. "That is not what I asked." "Do you know who she is?" "No." "That woman is retired Colonel Odessa Marchetti, United States Army. 28 years of service. She has more time in uniform than you've had on this earth." Whitfield's face drained white. Not pale, white. Like someone had pulled a plug and let everything run out. "She is also my mother." The street went silent, not quiet. Silent, the kind of silence where you can hear your own pulse in your ears. Boone dropped to his knees, hands shaking so badly. It took him 3 tries to find the keyhole on the cuffs. They clicked open. Odessa's wrists were raw and red. Theodore knelt beside his mother, one knee on the pavement, and gently took her hand, helping her sit up, then stand. She brushed the grit from her blouse, touched the scrape on her cheekbone, straightened her cross. She looked at Whitfield and said absolutely nothing. Her silence landed harder than any words could have. Theodore turned to Louise Abernathy. "Ma'am, did you record this?" Louise nodded, tears streaming. "From almost the very beginning. May I ask you to preserve that footage?" "I'm not deleting a single second of it." The other driver held up his own phone. "I got it too, all of it." Theodore made 3 calls, each under 30 seconds. First to his staff judge advocate contact. Second, to the Bellhaven County Sheriff's direct line. Third, to the FBI Regional Field Office in Atlanta. Same information, 3 times. Location, officers' names, nature of the incident, video evidence secured. Then, without even looking at Whitfield, he spoke to Sergeant Cole. "Sergeant, both deputies remain on scene until local command arrives. No one leaves this street." "Yes, sir." Whitfield tried once more, his voice sounding like it came from underwater. "Sir, this was a routine stop." She matched a description. Theodore didn't look at him. "You have the right to remain silent, Deputy Whitfield. I'd strongly suggest you use it." Whitfield's mouth closed. His arms dropped. Boone was already sitting on the curb, head in his hands. 36 soldiers, 2 deputies. One 76-year-old woman standing in the middle of it all, dusting grit off her Sunday blouse. The balance of power on that street hadn't shifted. It had flipped completely upside down. And Whitfield understood, standing there surrounded by uniforms that outranked him in every conceivable way, that the life he'd known was already finished. 19 minutes later, an unmarked sedan pulled up at the end of the block. Sheriff Douglas Renner sat inside it for a long moment before stepping out, straightening his tie like he was deciding which version of himself to bring to this street. He saw the convoy first. 16 federal vehicles, stretching 2 full blocks, soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder. Then the 2 stars on Theodore's chest. Then Odessa, sitting on her own porch steps now, a glass of water in her hand, Louise beside her. Then Whitfield and Boone, standing near their cruiser, badges still pinned, weapons still holstered, faces like men standing at the edge of a cliff. Renner walked straight to Theodore, extended a hand. "General Marchetti." "I'm Sheriff Renner. I want to assure you, your deputies assaulted a 76-year-old retired Army colonel on her own street," Theodore said, not taking the hand. "They fabricated probable cause, conducted an illegal search, used excessive force, and filed a false radio report calling her combative. Every second of it is on 3 separate recordings." Renner lowered his hand. His jaw worked side to side, the political calculus running visibly behind his eyes. "I want both deputies suspended immediately," Theodore said. "Badges and weapons, right here, right now." Renner hesitated. "1 second. 2. Sheriff, I've already contacted the FBI field office in Atlanta. They'll have agents here by Monday morning. How this plays out for your department depends entirely on the next 60 seconds. Renner turned to his officers, voice tight. "Whitfield, Boone, badges and service weapons." Now, Whitfield didn't move at first, eyes darting between Renner, Theodore, and the wall of soldiers along the street, searching for a way out. There wasn't one. He unclipped his badge slowly, like peeling a layer of skin off himself, and set it in Renner's palm. Then his weapon. Boone did the same, faster, head down, hands trembling. "You're both suspended without pay, effective immediately, pending full investigation," Renner said. Then something nobody expected. Sergeant Cole stepped forward. "Sheriff, that deputy is carrying a secondary recording device, right chest pocket." Every eye turned to Boone. His face went gray. Renner held out his hand.
"Boone, it's personal. It wasn't even—"
"Hand it over." Boone reached into his chest pocket and produced a small body camera, unmarked, no department insignia. His off-the-books camera, the one he wore because he liked re-watching the stops afterward, the takedowns, replaying them like highlight reels. Renner turned it over in his hand. "Was this recording during the stop?" I don't think it was on." Cole spoke again. "Sheriff, I'm former military police. That model has a continuous recording indicator. The light's still on. The light. Tiny. Red. Blinking. Still recording. Boone's face collapsed. Whatever composure he'd been holding on to broke apart right there on the sidewalk. "It was Whitfield's idea," he said, voice thin and shaking. "The stop. He always picks this street. He said she looked." He said. "Shut your mouth," Whitfield hissed. Too late. Every word was already captured. On Louise's phone, on the other driver's phone, and on Boone's own camera, still blinking red the entire time. Renner sealed the camera into an evidence bag pulled from his sedan, then turned back to Theodore. "General, I want you to know this department does not tolerate." "Sheriff," Theodore said, voice dropping instead of rising.
Your department has tolerated exactly this.
"My mother has lived on this street for 24 years. These deputies patrol her block every single day. She knows their cruiser. They know her Buick. This was not an accident. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a choice, made over and over again, and someone let it keep happening." Renner had nothing left to offer. He nodded once, walked Whitfield and Boone to his sedan, loaded them into the back seat, and drove away. The street went quiet again. The soldiers stood down. Engines rumbled back to life as the convoy prepared to move on, each vehicle rolling slowly past Odessa's porch, drivers giving small, silent nods through the windshield as they passed. She raised a hand and waved back. Small, steady, the wave of a colonel proud of her people. Theodore sat beside her on the porch steps and took her hand. He didn't say anything for a long while, just held it. Finally, Odessa spoke, not to Theodore, not to Louise, but to the camera still recording in Louise's hand. "I served this country for 28 years. My husband gave his whole career to that uniform. I'm 76 years old. I was bringing food to other veterans this morning, and I ended up face down on the street I've called home for over 2 decades. She paused, looked directly into the lens. "I'm not angry, I'm tired." Louise posted the video that same night. By Sunday afternoon, it had passed 7 million views. By Monday morning, 16 million. The clip of Odessa saying, "I'm not angry, I'm tired," ran on every news desk, every timeline, every group chat in the country. And the storm was only beginning. The FBI didn't wait for Monday. 2 agents from the Atlanta field office drove down Saturday night after seeing the video themselves. By Sunday morning, they were sitting in Sheriff Renter's office with a federal subpoena, demanding every traffic stop record, dashcam file, and internal affairs report. The Bellhaven County Sheriff's Office had generated over the past 5 years. Renner cooperated. He had no choice left. Within 72 hours, the case had a name, a federal civil rights investigation, case number assigned, task force assembled, 3 FBI agents, 2 Department of Justice attorneys, 1 data analyst. The first thing they pulled was Marcus Whitfield's personnel file. 3 formal excessive force complaints in 6 years. The first, a 26-year-old black man pulled over for a broken taillight that wasn't broken.
Sound familiar?
Whitfield had cuffed him on the hood, searched without consent, found nothing. The man filed a complaint. It was reviewed by Internal Affairs, run, as it turned out, by Captain Gordon Whitfield, Marcus's uncle. Finding, unsubstantiated, no action taken. The second complaint, a black teenager on a bicycle, 14 years old. Whitfield stopped him, demanded ID, claimed the boy matched the description of a robbery suspect. There had been no robbery that week. The boy's mother filed a complaint, reviewed by Internal Affairs. Finding, officer acted within departmental guidelines. No action taken. The third, a 48-year-old black woman, a deacon at her church, pulled over 2 blocks from Odessa's house, same corner, same street. Whitfield accused her of running a stop sign she never ran, then made her stand in light rain for 20 minutes while he searched her trunk. He found 3 bags of groceries and a choir robe. She filed a complaint, reviewed by Internal Affairs, finding insufficient evidence of misconduct. Case closed. 3 complaints. 3 black citizens, 3 dismissals, all reviewed and signed off by the same man, Captain Gordon Whitfield. The FBI saw the pattern inside 48 hours. Gordon Whitfield was placed on administrative leave pending a separate federal investigation into obstruction of justice and official misconduct. Then the data analyst went to work. 5 years of traffic stop records logged by date, time, location, officer, race of driver, stated reason for stop, and outcome. The numbers were damning. Black residents made up 14% of Bellhaven's population and accounted for 66% of all traffic stops, 81% of all vehicle searches. On Marcus Whitfield's patrol route specifically, 94% of his stops involved black drivers. 94%. The Department of Justice sought a federal grand jury. Marcus Whitfield was indicted on 2 counts: deprivation of civil rights under color of law and felony assault on an elderly person under Georgia state law. Casey Boone was indicted on 1 federal count, but Boone had already made his decision. The moment his own body camera footage was played back to him in the FBI field office, every lie Whitfield had told, every word Boone himself had stayed silent through, it broke something loose in him. He cooperated fully. He gave the FBI everything, not just that Saturday morning, but every shift, every time Whitfield picked that same corner of Larkspur and Pine, every comment Whitfield made in the cruiser that never made it into any report. Boone pleaded guilty to a reduced federal charge. The judge sentenced him to 14 months in federal prison and 3 years of supervised release. He would never wear a badge again as long as he lived. Whitfield went to trial. His attorney tried everything, argued standard procedure, argued officer safety, argued that Odessa had been non-compliant, even played the original radio dispatch where Whitfield called her combative. Then the prosecution played Boone's body camera footage. The jury watched Whitfield mock a 76-year-old woman, watched him invent a taillight violation out of thin air, watched him dump her purse onto the hood of her car, watched him throw her to the ground, watched her face strike the pavement, watched him cuff her and radio in, bored and calm that she'd resisted. The defense had nothing left to say. The jury deliberated for just under 3 hours, guilty on every count. On sentencing day, the courtroom was standing room only, national press crowding the back rows. Odessa sat in the front row in a dark blue dress, her gold cross, no veteran's cap. She never replaced the one that had been run over. The judge looked at Whitfield for a long moment before speaking. "Deputy Whitfield, you swore an oath to protect and serve this community. Instead, you targeted, you harassed, you fabricated evidence, and you brutalized a decorated veteran nearly 4 times your years of service. And when it was over, you lied about it over the radio, like it meant nothing at all. You didn't just assault a woman that morning. You assaulted the oath you took." Whitfield's face didn't change. He stared straight ahead, like a man who still, somehow, believed the world owed him something. 10 years in federal prison. No parole eligibility for 7. They walked him out in handcuffs, the same kind he'd put on Odessa. The courtroom was silent, except for the scrape of his shoes against the tile floor. Then came Gordon Whitfield, the uncle, the captain, who had buried 3 separate complaints, who had signed off on every cover-up. He pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice. 2.5 years in federal prison, permanently barred from any law enforcement position in the country. Sheriff Renner was never criminally charged, but the DOJ's own data made his position untenable. The numbers proved systemic bias under his watch, full stop. The county commission called an emergency session and gave him 2 options: resign or be terminated for cause. He resigned. No pension, no ceremony. He walked out of the building on a Tuesday afternoon carrying a cardboard box, and nobody shook his hand on the way out. A local advocacy coalition, the Bellhaven Fair Policing Alliance, a community group that had quietly grown to over 1,400 members in the wake of the video, filed a class-action civil rights lawsuit against the department, joined shortly after by the ACLU and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People's Legal Defense Fund. Odessa filed her own federal civil rights lawsuit. Her attorneys presented the footage, the buried complaints, the traffic stop data, and her medical records. Bellhaven County settled for $4.6 million, the largest police misconduct settlement in the county's history. Odessa kept $1.4 million. The remaining $3.2 million she donated to establish the Command Sergeant Major Odessa Marchetti Veterans Fund, named for her husband, providing legal aid, housing assistance, and emergency support to veterans facing discrimination anywhere in the state. The Department of Justice placed the Bellhaven County Sheriff's Office under a federal consent decree. The terms were non-negotiable. Department-issued body cameras on every officer, no personal recording devices permitted, mandatory quarterly bias training, an independent civilian oversight board with subpoena power, a complete overhaul of the internal complaint process, and, critically, no officer could ever again serve on an internal review board if they had a family member active within the same department. Louise Abernathy, the white neighbor who'd stood on her porch with a coffee mug and a phone, was appointed co-chair of the new Civilian Oversight Board. Her testimony was cited directly in the consent decree as the turning point that broke the case open. The bumper sticker she'd kept on her car for 15 years, she peeled off the day after the trial ended. Odessa was invited to speak at a National Veterans Leadership Summit in Washington, D.C. Her remarks lasted only a few minutes. They went viral for a second time. She said one line that nobody who heard it ever forgot. "I didn't serve for a perfect country. I served for one honest enough to fix itself when it's wrong." Months later, on a Saturday morning, the same street, the honeysuckle was blooming again. The air smelled like cut grass and warm pavement, a sprinkler ticking back and forth 2 houses down. Odessa Marchetti stood at the trunk of her Buick. Same car, same driveway. She was loading boxes, 14 cans of soup, 12 cans of beans, a new box of children's books this time, donated by the county library, 6 wool blankets, 2 bags of winter socks. The pantry had more than doubled in size since the story broke. Donations had come in from dozens of states. Volunteers had tripled. They'd had to rent a second storage unit just to hold it all. She lifted the last box. Her hip clicked. She paused, adjusted her grip, set it in beside the others, and closed the trunk with both hands firm, the way she always did. She wore a new blouse, pale blue, freshly pressed. Her gold cross hung where it always hung. No veteran's cap. She never replaced it. She didn't need to. Everyone on that street knew exactly who she was now. So did the rest of the country. A patrol car turned onto Larkspur Street. New markings, a new department seal. Part of the federal consent decrees required visual overhaul. It slowed as it passed her driveway. The window came down. A young deputy, a black woman in her late 20s, short hair, a department-issued body camera blinking steadily on her chest. "Morning, Colonel Marchetti. Need a hand with those boxes?" Odessa smiled, a real one. "I've got it, sweetheart, but thank you kindly." "You have a good day, ma'am." The cruiser rolled on, slow and respectful, the way a patrol car moving through a neighborhood ought to. Across the street, Louise stepped out onto her porch. Same coffee mug, same rocking chair, and waved. "Odessa, you need a ride today? My car's free." "I'm good, Louise. This old Buick's got another 100,000 left in her." Louise laughed and settled into her rocker. On the little table beside her sat a folder stamped with the Civilian Oversight Board seal. She had a meeting at noon. Third one that month. Odessa got in, turned the key. The engine caught on the second try, same as always. Some things didn't need fixing. Gospel music rolled through the speakers, the same station, the same old hymns. The morning sun sat low and gold through the windshield. Her phone buzzed. A text from Theodore.
Dinner tonight?
She typed back. Only if you're bringing the cornbread. 3 dots. Then,
Deal.
she set the phone down, backed out of the driveway, and turned left onto Larkspur, passing the corner of Larkspur and Pine, the spot where a cruiser used to sit every single Saturday morning, watching. It was empty now, just a stretch of curb, a few leaves gathered against the gutter. Nothing there at all. She drove on, windows down, gospel playing, cans rattling gently. In the trunk, same Saturday, same road, same woman, but not the same, not really. And everyone on that street knew it. Because justice didn't roll onto Odessa Marchetti's street in a convoy by accident. It arrived because a neighbor picked up her phone instead of looking away. Because a soldier raised her fist and said, "Stop." Because one person after another, faced with the choice to stay quiet, refused to. That's the truth about justice. It doesn't fall out of the sky, and it doesn't show up on its own. It starts the moment somebody decides that silence is no longer an option worth living with. Sometimes that somebody wears 2 stars on their shoulder. Sometimes it's a grandmother in a pressed blouse who won't take a step back. Sometimes it's a woman on a porch with a coffee mug and a phone. Sometimes it's you. So here's the question I want you to sit with. If you were Louise, standing on that porch, watching a 76-year-old woman get thrown to the ground by 2 people sworn to protect her, would you have hit record? And if you did, would you have shared it? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear every answer. And if this story made you feel something, even for just a moment, pass it along to someone who needs to hear it today.